All right, folks, we're here live with Irish Sports Daily, and we got the Yama here, and we've got Christian McCollum, and pretty much the results are in. We'll see on Anthony Lucas. I don't think that there's a whole lot of hope out there, but you never know. I'm sure they're still working it and seeing if they can turn the tide. But guys, I just put up some commentary, and I think a lot of people are a little bit depressed about what happened at wide receiver, and I totally get that and understand why. We're going to talk about that here in a second, and that type of thing. But overall, I think that this is a very underrated class, and I think that this class has some guys that are really going to surprise people when it's all said and done. When you look at what has happened at LSU, what has happened at USC, Oklahoma, heck, even Clemson, all these schools that made coaching changes, I think Notre Dame is going to come out ahead of everybody else when it comes to signing and where they rank and that type of thing. And I think people really need to think about that because SC had been planning this for a long time. It took them a long time to hire somebody, but their guy was in place before Notre Dame's was. And they're still struggling to land guys. Now, they're going to get a class, and they'll get some guys, and they'll get some surprises today. But overall, I think where Notre Dame landed, this is about as good as we could possibly expect. What do you think, Jamie?
I think so. I think you have to kind of look at it when a new coach takes over. It's kind of year zero, right? And I know that Freeman was already in place. And if he wasn't already in place as defensive coordinator and they didn't bring back Tommy Rees and McNulty and Nelson, et cetera, if that wasn't happening, I think the class probably would have fallen apart, obviously, right? But the fact that they were able to keep these guys all together for the most part, and the guys that left the class, I think if you look at it from like the bigger picture, those guys were all wavering for a while, right? Like Devin Moore, there was concerns about him for quite a while, and he had taken visits to Florida. And, he was obviously the only guy who decommitted right when Brian Kelly, like he was looking for an excuse, basically, right? Essentially. And I think with, Amorian Walker, the guy was a flake from the start. Like we kind of knew that was going to happen. You could never be unsure. And CJ Williams, for months, we knew that he was looking at staying home and all that. So I think that, if you look at it from that perspective and look at where, they weren't going to be able to get in on anybody really late that they weren't already involved with, then I think they did a pretty good job closing out the class. And obviously Billy Schrauth, if that happened on signing day, people would look at it a lot different too.
Oh yeah. No question about it. Chris, your overall take on this?
Yeah, exactly what Jamie said. The guys that they lost are guys that were wavering. Shoot, CJ Williams was taking visits to USC when they didn't even have a coach, in place. Devin Moore has been shaky since the beginning of the fall, and Amorian Walker as well. I think it's all perception and timing, right? So this is what national signing is about, though. People get excited. They want to watch it. They want to see who they get. So when you lose guys and don't really add guys, that's not very exciting. But like Jamie said, if Billy Schrauth commits on National Signing Day, that's the story. Devin Moore, CJ Williams, and Amorian Walker, those guys could have been decommitted weeks ago, months ago, really. And if the story is you're going to bat, you're trying to hang on to, Junior Tuihalamaka, you're trying to get, see if you can hang on to Jalen Sneed, and then maybe add Billy Schrauth to the class at the end. That is an entirely different narrative, right? I think almost to their detriment when it comes to perception, how quickly Notre Dame was able to lock these guys up when Marcus Freeman went out on his tour and all the staff members made in-home visits and assured, everyone that had committed in the beginning that they didn't need to stress, things were going to be the same. And it was a positive. Everyone that came out this past weekend, it was almost like a celebration. So I think, you have to give Notre Dame staff credit for how quickly they locked down this class. And like Jamie said, the guys they didn't lock down were guys that weren't locked down, for months now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the wide receiver position, the situation that they're in. We're going to talk about some other things about, why this happened and that type of thing. But If there's one thing that I hope that Marcus Freeman learned from this, guys, is that there are no sure things, and you can't stop recruiting. And in today's market and what's happening today, I think it's far more important than it was even last year to keep recruiting with this NIL money. And we're going to talk about this and what's coming up and what is happening out there. With the way things are going right now, I hope that the staff learn more than anything that you got to keep recruiting. There are no guarantees at this point, and anybody can flip at any time. And so I think you need to be upfront with players and say, look, we're not going to stop recruiting because this is what happened to us last year, and there's no guarantee that everybody's going to sign. And so we got to protect ourselves. You leave and we're stuck in the lurch. Now understand that, it's that way because coaches can leave and you end up being effective too. But we also have to look out for our best interest. And so we're going to keep recruiting. We like you. We've offered you a scholarship. You have a scholarship, blah, blah, blah. But when push comes to shove, we got to look out for ourselves too. And so we're going to keep recruiting. Expect us to bring more wide receivers on campus, even though we have this. We're not going to accept anybody at this point unless we feel like we have somebody wavering. But we're going to still continue to recruit players. And that needs to happen. And it needs to happen all throughout the year. And I really hope that was a lesson learned. Jamie?
Yeah, and I think the point being made is that Freeman's learning the lesson, but he wasn't the guy who was in charge
exactly
of this, right? So I see people, writing on the board, on Irish Sports Daily board, or people on Twitter talking about how, oh man, if only Freeman could have closed on these guys. And like we said, these guys were waiting for months, whatever. But not just that, he wasn't there. He's not the guy in charge of the overall plan, right? And I think everyone could have said, like, at the very least with Amori and Walker, maybe you're trying everything you can to do CJ Williams. You don't want to upset him, but you could at least say to CJ Williams, like, Amori and Walker, we are not sure about. So we have to add another receiver in this class. Like, we have to bring in another guy. Like, I don't understand why that never happened. Right. And obviously you don't want to take a guy just to take a guy, but that, when you look back at this class, that will be, when you look at how things have gone with the transfers in the previous years and how guys like X Watts and Cam Hart, who were brought in to play receiver, are now playing DB, like, the numbers are bad there. Right. And in order to, now they have to try to basically patch it up in, January to maybe get one or two guys there. Obviously look at the portal, but as we've talked about right before we got on air, Mike, it's not going to be an easy fix in the portal. They're probably going to get, grad transfer guys, because they're not going to get, if you see some guy who was a 5-star guy somewhere else and he's leaving after year 1 or year 2, most of the times there's some kind of academic hurdle there that is going on there. And Notre Dame can't take those guys. So they can't even get in the game with those guys. So it's not an easy fix. And so because of that, Notre Dame has to have that plan in place, or else this can happen.
I think there's two things to look at. As you mentioned, the wide receivers in the portal, the academic part of things is what people don't get. And I've been trying to explain this to people, and maybe I'm just a terrible communicator and they're not kind of getting it. But it's a situation where when they go to these football factories, first of all, half the kids can't even get in, or not half, but there's a number who can't even get into Notre Dame to begin with. And then you take that number and all of a sudden these kids go to a football factory like Alabama or Auburn or someplace like that, and they're not taking real classes. They're not taking stuff that you would take at Notre Dame. And so they essentially would be taking a year or 2 years worth of education, and hardly any of those credits would transfer into Notre Dame. And so there'd be like 2 years of lost, schooling, where a lot of those credits wouldn't transfer into Notre Dame. And they're not on a path to graduate like Notre Dame would want you to be. And that's just the reality of what happens at football factories. And now, of course, they do take some classes that are legit, of course, but there's a lot of classes that are designed to keep players eligible that a lot of these kids are taking. And then on top of it, I mean, we know for a fact, the three of us know for a fact, these kids don't even go to class. They don't go. It's all done online. They have a tutor sitting right next to them. The tutor's probably taking their tests. I mean, it's not the same situation as what you would get at Notre Dame. And so that's why it's real difficult for these kids to get in when they transfer after a year. The other part, Jamie, I think that you have to think about too is with Notre Dame's situation right now, they don't have the elite quarterback. So if there is an elite wide receiver, there is not that draw that other schools will have. There's no Ewers that's out there that some at Notre Dame where they're like, oh gosh, this guy's a great player. If I go there, he's going to get me the ball.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And so because that's not there, it's not a real big draw. Now, what Notre Dame does have is the opportunity right now. So for a grad transfer, right, they have the opportunity for a guy to come in and if, just like Skoranek, and they can point to Skoranek and say, look, here's a guy who, just wanted a shot and wanted to improve his draft stock. Now he's playing in the NFL. By the way, did you watch him last week? That's a story you can tell. And that's a story that's believable. And by the way, Notre Dame's going to have the opportunity because of the depth chart that they have right now at wide receiver, especially if some of these guys don't come back. So there is a selling point there for maybe a grad transfer, but a younger guy, it's going to be difficult to get. And I think that that's what hurts Notre Dame, when it comes to this transfer portal. It's going to be different, and all these other schools are going to benefit from this. But guys, here's the question I have, and here's the thing that I think that people don't think about the transfer portal, is you're going to get a lot of guys who are leaving that I would call are me guys. It's not working out. It has nothing to do with me, of course. It isn't because I'm not working hard. It's not because, it's just I am not getting a fair shake, and it's all about me, and all these players are going to go to these places. And that's good if you got some talent, but I think when it comes to chemistry, when it comes to culture, when it comes to those types of things, if things don't work out right away for those people who transfer in, disappointment sets in. You got more bad apples in there trying to ruin your culture. And so sometimes I'm not sure that this transfer portal would be a good thing for some schools. For some it would. But, you look at what happened at Florida State, and you look at what happened with Florida and some of these transfers in and out, and, a lot of times it's not a good thing. Your thoughts, Jamie?
Well, I think, if you look at, say, what happened with the 2020 team, and they brought in Ben Skoranek, graduate transfer, and they knew him. He's a Fort Wayne kid, right? They obviously knew people in Fort Wayne that knew him as well. There was some familiarity there, and that helped a lot. And sure. I think with Nick Mccloud, he was a captain at NC State. He was a captain, so you view it from that lens. And I mean, that's obviously the ideal, is you're picking up those kind of guys. Those guys aren't always available, but really when it comes down to the only way that Notre Dame, I could see them taking a kid that, was, sophomore eligibility or whatever, is if that was a kid that they had recruited, maybe Marcus Freeman or Mike Mickens recruited them before, whatever. They had some sort of relationship with them where they knew the background about them beforehand. That would be the only thing that really made sense for it, because, it's not something that someone just easily fits into. Like I know all the time too. Here's a perfect example. Iowa State has a bunch of guys in the portal right now. And I know Notre Dame is looking for a safety, Ashim Young, really good player at Iowa State. Well, I mean, if you look at it just as game film, you'd be like, man, Notre Dame should take this guy. He could come and help, maybe even start, right? But if you look at it and you're like, well, he was a high 4-star kid, got bumped down to a 3-star kid because he had like a pretty serious arrest in high school, was originally committed to Penn State. After a year, I think he was at JUCO for a year, ended up at Iowa State. And that's kind of how, he's there. And, maybe he's turned it around. I don't know what exactly is going on with him, but it's not an obvious take. You just don't look at it just based on this guy can play, let's take him. There's other stuff that goes into it, a lot more background info to look into.
All right, Christian, I want to talk to you about this, and I think there's some truth that needs to be said about what is happening today in college football. And this has been my fear for a long time, that once this NIL stuff came out, that this is what was going to happen. And we can talk about. I'm not sure we want to get into a name, Christian, on this, but let's. I just want the truth to be known about a text you got yesterday and what is going to happen with college recruiting at this point. And so I'm going to just turn it over to you, and I just want you to explain. People can probably figure out who it was. We're not going to sit and name people, but this is the reality. This is what's coming for college football and for recruiting. And Notre Dame, has found out, and everybody else is going to find out as well. And it's I don't know how you change it. This NIL money is going to really impact signing day. It's going to impact recruiting. It's going to impact everything. But go ahead, Christian.
Well, who else found out is Lane Kiffin.
Yeah.
You say what you want about Lane Kiffin, but I love the way the guy says it, how it is. And it was more than a text too, right? I had conversations with two separate people who absolutely are on the on the inside of this so you can. Basically, it's the eve of signing day, and you're communicating with these recruits, trying to see, are you coming, are you not coming, what are you doing, blah blah blah, and that's what has gone on for a generation here when it comes to recruiting. But now, like you said, Mike, there's a new element into it where it's NIL. Hey, school X is offering this NIL. You know what I mean? And one guy that would be like as close to as you can get, he would say, well, I don't know exactly what was being offered, but another guy that's kind of pretty close to is like, man, it's hard to turn down that kind of money. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what's happening, right? So you get to the eve of signing day and you're torn between two schools and you say, hey, this school is offering X. Okay, what can you guys do? Can you guys offer me? Can you beat that offer? Can you come close to that? And that's the way that some of this stuff played out in the end. And I mean, you could see this coming, right? Everyone could see this coming when they came up with the idea of this, which I'm not necessarily opposed to in practice NIL. I knew it would be difficult to police, but you also knew this is going to come down. This would come down to. You're torn between two schools. You don't know what to do. And, you're balancing this relationship with this relationship, and throw $100,000, throw $200,000 in there. That's going to sway things pretty closely. And I don't know what the solution is, how to stop it. How to kind of regulate it. But it's already here. It's not like, the Wild West is coming. It's here now. And that's kind of what was going down yesterday.
I'm going to add this quote here because it's important. Eric Fasano, been a customer of mine for 20 plus years, says ND needs to get in the NIL game in order pronto, or they'll be relegated quickly to a pay no mind heap. Here's the problem with that. Notre Dame can't get in the NIL game. And neither can Alabama, and neither can Michigan, and neither can any of these legally, right? That's the point. This should not be happening. How can X school say to a prospect, we'll get you $100,000? They're not supposed to be facilitating it. They're not supposed to be involved at all. But that's what's happening. That's the problem. And Notre Dame's not going to get into that game because, one, they're on probation. All right, they're on probation. They can't get in that game. Otherwise, they're on death penalty probation. The other part is that's just not who they are. They're not going to just buy players. That's just not who they are. And that's what's concerning about this. And I told both you guys last night, I've been telling you this for a while, but it came true last night that what is going to happen is these guys are going to go out. The recruiting cycle is going to be, okay, who likes me? We're going to go on some visits. I'm going to commit, and I'm going to reserve myself a spot, okay? And this is my spot, and I'm going to reserve that, but I'm not committed. I'm going to still take visits. I'm going to still communicate with these coaches. I'm going to still do everything that I'm supposed to be doing as a recruit, but I'm going to reserve my spot. And then, if I sign with that school, great. If I don't, I don't. But at least I know I have a spot there. And now the real negotiation starts. So 1 day, 2 days before signing day, then the money comes in. All right, well, Tennessee says they can give me this, and Penn State says they can give me this. What are you going to do for me, Notre Dame? What are you going to do for me? And that's what it's coming down to. And it didn't happen just at Notre Dame. I guarantee you it was a lot worse at Alabama and Georgia and Auburn. But the difference is they have the ability to, well, I shouldn't say, well, all schools have the ability to do it if they want to get involved in it, but it's illegal. It shouldn't happen. And as a coach, and here's where, I've been one of the guys that defends the coaches in this, and everybody's like, well, if the coach leaves, the kids, they're stuck. And no, they're not. They've never been stuck. They can leave anytime. Now with the transfer portal, they can leave anytime they want, period. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander at this point. It's like if you're a coach or you're a recruit, you think this is good, what you're going to find is the 22 starters, they're going to be in a good position on the roster. Everybody else, your scholarship is up. We'll cut you in 5 seconds because this is what you're going to do to us on signing day. Why should we have any loyalty or faith or any faith or loyalty to you? Because you could do this to us at any time, not just on signing day. You could do it the first semester of college. You could do it the second semester of college. You can leave anytime and leave us in the lurch. So we have the right to just cut you at any time. Your scholarship, see you later. Yeah, I'm sure you want an education. Yeah, we talked about that, but you know what? You're not working out for us. You're gone. And that's what college football is now going to be. And it's sad. It really is sad. And it bothers me. And it shouldn't come to this. And it's like everything else in the world. Greed, greed, greed. Everybody, I want mine. What's mine? Give me mine. And it's about me. And that's the problem. And it's frustrating. Yama, what do you got to say?
Well, not that I don't agree with most of what you said, but I think we should kind of pivot back to the fact that Notre Dame signed 12 kids that are ranked in the top 200 in the composite in this class. And I don't want to ignore the kind of what's happening right now in college football or what's happened with CJ Williams or Morian Walker. I don't want to ignore that, but I mean, they got some studs in this class.
Oh, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that, and that will be next. I just think it's important to talk about this because Notre Dame needs to learn from this, and the fans need to understand that this is what's happening. And
here's the thing, though, Mike. Like you said, all they're doing, I mean, those Southern schools you mentioned, they're just kind of directing their bag men in a different direction now for the NIL. And what would need to happen for Notre Dame is they need to, there needs to be like some rich guy, Notre Dame fan, alum, whoever, who has to say like, man, we lost out on this. Well, I got to give like 50 grand to the receivers like they did at Texas. And
that's exactly what happened in Texas. They know that their O-line is crap.
Their O-line has been crap for years.
Exactly. And some guy just said, you know what, I've had enough of this. Go buy the best O-lineman we can find. And that's what it is. That's exactly what happened. Absolutely.
And, so I think that, that I don't know if that's going to happen for Notre Dame, but like if someone is really that angry about it and they're willing to kind of, pay up for all these other things for the program, whatever, I mean, that is the next phase of college football.
It really is. And it's sad. But now we're on to your point, because I think that's the most important point. I just wanted to get this out of the way so people kind of understand what it is. But your point is exactly right. We should be here celebrating the men who chose the hard road to come to Notre Dame, and that's what we're here to do. And there's some damn fine football players in this class. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know where it's going to rank, and I don't care because I guess I just trust my rankings, and I know that sounds kind of arrogant, but just from doing this for a long time and the types of players who are successful at Notre Dame, there are the 5-star guys, and then there are the guys that can be successful at Notre Dame and play like 5-star players. I think Notre Dame got a lot of those types of guys in this class, Jamie, and I'm really, really excited about where they're at. And there are holes, as we talked about, but there are holes at all the schools who had changes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you start with the linebacker class. It's as good as any Notre Dame assigned. I was talking with Greg on our YouTube show the other day. Maybe since like the Corey Minor, Jimmy Friday, Howard class, like that's in terms of where guys are ranked and how it's up there. It's up there with that, right? Like Jalen Sneed is a special athlete. A guy out of South Carolina that normally like that is 100% Marcus Freeman. That happened because of him, and that's a guy that normally wouldn't go to Notre Dame, and he landed him, and that was massive. And I think Joshua Burnham is a stud. I think that guy, obviously plays quarterback for his team. Great athlete. You could see him on the basketball court and what he can do there too. But once this guy just is able to focus on just playing linebacker, or maybe be a Viper, potentially a Viper too. He can be a difference maker, right? He the first linebacker who was ever the player of the year in Michigan, right? That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Junior Tuihio Alamaka, an elite run stuffer, right? A guy, that I compare him to would be Tavon Coney. And if he's Tavon Coney, you're doing backflips, because maybe Tavon Coney, not the, a little bit what his detractors against him too, a little bit stiff, maybe not the most, agile in pass coverage, but you'd sure want Tavon Coney out there on first and second down. So I think he has that kind of potential. And then Nolan Ziegler, in many other classes, you'd be talking about him as this top guy. And had a dominant season as a receiver, and really just a great football player, instinctual guy who plays out in space, perfect fit for a rover type. And like that linebacker class, that can help shape what they're going to become. And obviously they got some pretty good linebackers on campus right now, but the defense has a chance to be pretty special, with that kind of as the backbone of it.
Well, and first of all, I'm glad you mentioned Ziegler, because I think in any other class, people would be like, "Man, this guy is amazing." You know what I mean? Because this kid is big, tall, fast, can run, has really fluid hips for a linebacker too. Can flip his hips, So I think he can be a really good coverage type linebacker. And I think that is real important. But when you look at the skill players, Chris, while there isn't a lot of them, I really like the guys they have. I think Eli Raritan has a potential to be easily as good as Mayer, maybe even better, just because I think he's a little bit faster than Mayer. And when you look at J.D. Price, I said in my commentary, I think he's as talented or more talented than anybody else in the room right now. I honestly believe that. Kid's faster, can move left and right, catch the ball. One cut runner. I really like the way he is. Showed much better vision this year. I think he's a tremendous talent. And then, I think Tobias Meriwether, out of all the realistic receivers that they had a chance at, he was my favorite. I think the sky is the limit for that guy. Once he gets in the weight room, I think he's going to get faster. But again, his ability to turn left and right for a guy that tall is very unique. So, Chris, I really like the skill players in this class. I like Holden Stays. It's Angeli, I think, has the potential to be a really good player.
You know what? And all those guys you mentioned are kind of like what we've talked about before, Mike, where I don't want to call them under the radar, right? They're not like diamonds in the rough. Like, big schools are coming after these guys. But they're also guys that Notre Dame found their way in on early, right? They were like in there early. JD Price was like, oh yeah, he was kind of like, people were kind of excited. Then they seen his senior film and like, wow, same thing with Tobias Meriwether and Angeli as well. And these are guys that are going to fit, right? So they're going to be good fits. They're going to be good Notre Dame guys. And I'll tell you, the Notre Dame staff, along with you, Mike, they're fired up about those guys. They think, they're almost laughing about Eli Raritan when he bust onto the scene this senior year. They're like, yeah, nobody's known about this guy because COVID. Nobody's seen him. He's an absolute monster. Yeah. Just watch, And Jelly, there's a lot of questions about when they offered him, like, well, he hasn't even started a game yet. and then, his junior season was a kind of an odd one, just like everybody else. And then he had a great senior season. Even people that were high on Angeli in Jersey that I know personally before were like, wow, he's really, really developed. And then, Meriwether, look at him. He's kind of a thin guy, but man, watch him on defense. He's a baller on defense. He gets pick sixes. He hits people. It is an exciting class. And like you said, JD Price, I mean, he probably had maybe Burnham, but like in terms of like impressive senior seasons, JD Price had a monster year. He was in 200 yards, 3 touchdowns a game, it seemed like. In Notre Dame, the staff is really excited about those guys.
Jamie, your thoughts? Skill talent.
Yeah, I think what Chris brought up in terms of, all of them being on early. And I mean, this is the first time that I can remember. I don't know about you, Mike, where I watched all the senior film of these guys, and there wasn't one guy where I was like, he didn't improve like I wanted him to. I wanted to see this and I didn't see it. Almost all these
like
guys.
Last year, we saw a few guys like that. Last year, we saw a few, but this year,
definitely. And there's usually a few in every class, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's for different reasons. Sometimes guys are playing hurt or whatnot. And sometimes guys just regress. It happens, right? But, it didn't happen with any of these guys. And I think really, especially with those skill guys, and I'll just highlight Raritan because I really think once that guy is able to get in the weight room and put on the necessary weight that he needs to play, I mean, I think he's a special athlete, like really, really special. Like
I mean, first round potential. Yes. First round potential, no question.
Definitely. Like I would not be shocked at all if you put him by the time he's done at Notre Dame, he's in that same category with Eifert, Rudolph, Komet, Mayer. Like he has that kind of like crazy ability. So I think, when there's a guy, when you add a guy like that who has that kind of high ceiling, and Meriwether, I think too, maybe has a high ceiling out of all of these guys. Mm-hmm. And then Price, to me, it's a little bit like where I think Diggs is more of a banger, Astemi more of a banger. Both guys have good feet, but they're definitely more, I would say, inside guys, not home run hitters. And Price is kind of that home run hitter there. And that's why I think he was important in the class too. So I kind of like how they, where those guys fit, right? And obviously you're missing out on the more receivers, and that has to be addressed. But aside from that, it's a pretty good group.
And then we start talking about some of the big uglies. When you look at this offensive line, well, I don't think that. I think if you looked at both classes on paper, you'd say, okay, they're pretty similar as far as where they'd rank and all that type of stuff. But then that all of a sudden now Alt is certainly a hit. Fisher is a hit. We know that Rocco's more than likely a big hit. And they like the other two. But when I look at this class coming in, I see a lot of the same similarities in that, an Emil Wagner could easily be as good as Alt when you look at the frame that we just recently saw in pictures. And then you're like, holy crap, this guy can move like Alt, but also plays physical and has the the length and everything that you're looking for as a player. So that's fantastic. And then you add Billy Strouth, one of the toughest guard types that could play tackle, going to be a 300-pounder coming in. Same thing with Tanona, same thing with Craig. And this is a really good offensive line class. And the floor on this offensive line class, I think, is as good as they've had coming in for a very long time. Thoughts, you?
Yeah, and I know, Mike, you've always done it where you looked at back-to-back classes and how they had. And then when you look at how it fits with back-to-back classes, not just in terms of like the talent, but where everyone fits in terms of position-wise, because they've done it before where they've had good back-to-back classes, but you're like, I don't know if they have enough tackles, or I don't know if they have enough guards. And I don't think that's the case with this group, right? So especially because, you look at it, and let's just say you pencil in Alt and Fisher at the two tackle spots the next few years. Well, you get Emil Wagner is going to have that time that he probably will need to add the weight and physically and technically develop. And then when that guy gets on the field, I think he can be special. I think he really has maybe he could be like a first round pick one day. He has that kind of like athleticism and the length and all those kind of boxes that you want to check there. And he's mean, right? Like, everyone always says when we see an athletic offensive tackle, they say, oh, Ronnie Stanley, the guy plays basketball, Ronnie Stanley. Well, meaner version of Ronnie Stanley, right? And all those guys really from top to bottom, I really think Shrout was really important to add to, because I think he's a swing guy, could maybe play tackle, could play guard, but you just don't see many guys his size who play offense. And it's like we mentioned the other day, he could legitimately play defense.
Mm-hmm.
He could legitimately play defense. He could start on defense for a good number of Power 5 schools. He's a really good athlete, and I think his ceiling is as high as any guard that they've signed in quite a while.
All right, folks, I wanted to mention, if you're not a member of irishsportsdaily.com, it's a great time to sign up. You can go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily in the top section up there. You'll see a premium section. You can sign up for a subscription. Lots going on. There'll be a lot of stuff going on with the bowl game, and then we have probably some coaching hires that we're going to have to deal with, and then, of course, spring practice coming up. Great time. Everybody's excited about Notre Dame football, and for good reason. Now, Chris, let's talk about you and I have been around the block in this recruiting game for quite some time. We've dealt with a lot of staff members, coaching staff. I'd say right now, this is the best it's been in a very long time when it comes to quality assistance, when it comes to guys committed to recruiting, when it comes to a plan. We saw the social media and video production take a huge jump. I mean, right now, where Notre Dame's at as far as recruiting goes, this is the best I've ever seen it, and kind of by a long shot. And I think what Freeman is going to do is even push that higher, as far as he's going to create higher expectations for his staff, higher expectations for results. And I'm really excited about it.
Without a doubt. He said as much. He said, if you're not a ace recruiter, you probably don't belong on this staff. So yeah, as good as it is now, it'll get better. It'll be better in 2 months, at least in his mind. And the other thing that I thought was really telling was Tommy Rees had that really, really insightful interview with Ryan Russillo, and he acknowledged, yeah, man, when Mark Freeman came in and he's down the hall and they're recruiting their ass off, that makes me want to work harder. I don't want to get outworked by the guy down the hall. So that made me raise my level of standard as a recruiter. And that's what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That's the only way it'll work, right? That's how it works. You can't just, tell someone they have to do something. They got to be motivated. And now defense, forget about it. The whole team, forget about it. Mark Freeman's going to be a great recruiter and set that standard. On defense, he's going to be leading the charge. And now Rees has said as much on offense. He wants to raise his level. Now, that'll be continuous throughout. And the fact is the relationships on this staff, especially, you take defensive guys, offensive guys with each other, they all really like each other. And so Tommy Rees has a great relationship with, guys like John McNulty, Lance, Taylor, those guys. So they're all going to be working together. Same thing, obviously, Freeman and Mickens go way back. Same thing with Elston. So these guys are going to be working together. O'Leary's been a tenacious recruiter. Every time I talk to anybody about O'Leary, it's about how his energy is so, contagious and infectious. And so these guys are continuously raise each other's level. And like you said, the guys that they bring in, we're probably going to have some additional staff members in the coming weeks here. Those guys, they're going to check the recruiting box. So this staff's going to get even better when it comes to recruiting. And it's going to be exciting to see.
I agree 100%. We got about a half an hour before the Marcus Freeman press conference, so we'll cut off at when that fires up. But until then, if you have questions you would like to ask us, and you're in chat, just put a question mark or the word question so we know that you want us to answer that question, and we'll get to them going from, so we wanted to have a little bit of time to answer your questions, and then sometime shortly after, we got to figure out a time, but sometime a little later in the day, we'll come back on and we'll probably answer a lot more of your questions that you may have about recruiting, roster, all that kind of stuff moving forward. So, but for now, if you have a question and you're in chat, just make sure you type question or put a question mark so we know, and we'll go ahead and answer it. You know, when I look at the situation now, I mean, obviously we know that we got some holes that we're going to have filled at wide receiver. I mean, it's now really, really important, I think, to try and get Kevin Austin to come back, try and get all these guys to come back because, you know, I love Lorenzo. I love Deion Colsey, you know, and Jaden Thomas. I think they're all going to be good players, but you do need a little bit, not just experience, you just need numbers at this point. So I think that's the big part of recruiting right now that they're going to have to tackle. What do you think, Yama?
Yeah, I think so. And sorry, as I was just seeing the comments, this one guy has asked the question, has everybody signed except for Walker and Williams? He's asked. Yeah, if you follow ISD Update on Twitter, that's our Twitter handle. We updated all of the guys they signed when they did. The class as
did it on
expected.
The site too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
On the site as well.
It all says that it's all.
The only remaining potential out there is Anthony Lucas, and we don't anticipate it, but you never know what's going to happen. So,
yeah. So all the guys who were committed signed. CJ Williams decommitted the other day, and you know, Walker might as well have been decommitted for months. But, anyways, sorry, this guy just kept asking, so I had to address it.
Okay.
But you know. I think with next year at the receiver, you know, position, I think it's going to be interesting because you think with Austin, I mean, I imagine with all the stuff that he's had to the hoops that he's had to kind of, you know, climb through and everything that he's done at Notre Dame, and he's had a good finish to the year. He definitely had a strong finish to the year. I think he wants to get out. I would imagine that he probably would want to, but I don't know where his grade is going to be. It might not matter to a guy like him. He might just want to get out, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think to me that is a critical, important sell job because, you know, otherwise then you're elevating Deion Colsey, who might be ready, might not be, I don't know, but you're elevating him as that top kind of boundary 50-50 guy. And I think that's tough, right? And I even think with Avery Davis, if, you know, especially because do you want to go into a year where, you know, you coming off an ACL tear and then you're going to try to go pro? He won't get drafted. He's going to have to kind of fight his way through a practice squad and hopefully kind of rise up. If he comes back, he might have a better shot, right? And then that opens up the possibilities of what you do with Styles and whether or not you play him in the slot or outside and all that. So, I think it's important that Austin is hugely important to get back. I think Avery Davis, if he wants to come back and he's open to it, I think that's the guy you try to sell hard to come back. And not just that because, you know, he's a good player and he can help in that way, but also too, I think if all of these guys leave, all of a sudden Styles and Colsey, they become like veterans in the room and they barely played really, right? So I think you do kind of need some of that leadership and some just a little bit more of that around. I think it's just good to have that around anytime. And obviously Avery Davis being a captain, you know, that helps out too. So I think that's another big piece of it that what, you know, you would like to see, you know, and personally too, just for Avery Davis is just as a guy who roots for Avery Davis. I've always rooted for him, you know, him getting bounced around all these positions. Would love to see him come back and have a big year.
Yeah, it's important, and you know they have 4 potential guys. You know, with Wilkins and Lindsey as well. You know, there's 4 potential guys. You got to get 2 of them back at least, and who knows? Maybe all 4 will come back. You know, we can debate on whether they all should come back, and that's for another topic at some other day. But it's just really important to get 2 of them to come back, and hopefully they do. All right, got some questions here. First one. Quarterback next year, will we see a pure Buckner show or a blend of Pine and Buckner? What do you think, Christian?
I think it's going to be Buckner. But I'll tell you this, and we've talked about Pine before, and everything I'm told recently, as of in the last few weeks, he'll be back. So, and he's ready to compete. And I think that, you know, he was pleased that Reese got the job. So, you know, if Tommy Reese is the one making decisions there, maybe he is. I think that, you know, Pine thinks he'll have a shot, but, you know, maybe it was a Kelly thing. I don't know. And maybe it was just a, you know, offensive thing where it seemed like they addressed it multiple times and say, "Hey, Kelly," as if well, when Tyler's here next year, well, it's Tyler's show next year. We'll do that next year, almost like Pine was a afterthought. So it'll be interesting to see, but it seems like Buckner obviously has a leg up, in my opinion.
Well, here's the thing, and I think that was a good point about Reese, and I think that's telling that Reese is obviously handling and managing the situation right. If Pine knows that, hey, this is the guy, and still wants to come back, I think that says a lot about the way Tommy Reese has kind of handled this situation, and we'll see, And I think if I'm Marcus Freeman, I tell the entire team, I don't care if you're a 3-year starter, what you were for Brian Kelly is not what you are for me. Let's see what you're going to do for our team now that we're in charge. And I think you'll see that happen. Next question. I apologize if it's been discussed already, but since the staff knew Walker and Williams were looking around months ago, was there a contingency plan to fill those holes? Not really. I mean, the only guy they really offered was Wesley Grimes, and Grimes kind of just didn't show a lot of interest, but Notre Dame really didn't push it either. So I never understood what the offer was. If you don't really try and get him on campus, I don't know what the point of that was. Jamie, thoughts?
Yeah, that was the only guy really. You can go back to the summer and Joseph Griffin, the guy, I assume he signed with Boston College today. I'm not sure if he did, but
he did. Yep.
Yeah. So that was one of the other guys that was kind of a later offer, but no, they didn't approach this year with looking at which guys impressed them on senior film other than Grimes. That was it. So, and maybe they just didn't see anybody, right? And maybe that had something to do with it, but still, as
still need bodies.
About,
yeah,
you need bodies, and you
have no guarantee the 4 are coming back.
Go back and revisit some of these other guys, right?
Yeah.
There could be something there, right? So obviously we saw what happened with the coaching carousel and all that too. So there were guys out there that they maybe could have at least got involved with, and maybe got in on the last weekend or something. And maybe that doesn't make a difference at all, but at least they are trying to get a backup plan. Like I think they were just kind of like hoping and praying at the end of it, and that's not a plan.
Well, and I know a lot of Irish fans don't want to hear this, but it doesn't help when a recruit and his family goes on every Irish message board and everything, Facebook, everywhere, and the first thing that they read is, the wide receiver coach sucks and needs to be fired. I mean, that doesn't give you a whole lot of faith that if I choose Notre Dame that I'm going to have, a great coach, or even that this coach is going to be around. And I do think, I know people don't want to hear that, but I do think that impacts, especially when you don't have an elite quarterback and you're trying to get some elite players. It does have an impact, whether people want to agree with it or believe it. It really does. And I mean, Chris, you talked to all 3 of the recruits that were committed, and they all said the same thing to you. Well, I don't even know if Dell's going to be here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And yep. How would they get that understanding? Brian Kelly didn't say, Dell was going to. I mean, this was a question they had before Brian Kelly left. You know what I mean?
Oh, and they mentioned
many times. Many times.
They mentioned the fans, as in, like, I know the fans give Coach Dell a hard time. Yeah. Or I know. So these are the guys that are committed that see
exactly.
That. So imagine how many other people don't. Or maybe not even give it a shot. But, as far as receivers go, I mean, yeah, everyone asks the same question, right? Like, what was the backup plan? It's a great question, right? You're not going to get an answer from us because the people I've talked to, at least, they say there should have been a different plan. You know what I mean? The people over here. Now, I'm sure Coach Freeman will be asked about his press conference. It'll be interesting to see what he says.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to what you were saying, Mike, before about, having to recruit, like continue recruiting, you got to take it. The thing is, last night, me and you were telling people, like, a lot of fans were like, well, tell Marion Walker in or out and hit the road. Like, yeah, I understand that feeling, but you're not getting anything out of that, right? You're not saying hit the road. You got nothing else to back up on. That's why you keep recruiting, right? So you tell someone like Marion Walker, all right, you're still visiting these schools. This is why we're bringing these other receivers in. We'd like to have you. Then you get to a point where you say, all right, we got to know now. Marion, are you with us or not? And if you're with us, you got to be done talking to other schools, done taking other visits, or else we're moving on and we're going to take, Jimmy here or Joe there. Yeah. And when you don't have that sort of leverage, there's nothing you can do.
And there's been countless guys in the past that Notre Dame has been honest with and said, we're not sure we have a spot for you, but we really like you. And it worked out. And one of Notre Dame's greatest players in recent history, in Drew Tranquil, was such a guy. And, they were very honest with Drew Tranquil and said, look, we don't know whether we have a spot for you, but just be patient. We love you. We want you to be a part of this, but let's just see how it comes out. You're committed to Purdue. You don't need to do anything at this point, but we like you. And sure enough, Drew Tranquil turned out to be one of the best players Notre Dame has had in a decade. So that's what you need to do when you're recruiting in this. And I think that's what was failed. And this is the next question. Why is the sky falling on wide receiver when the final signing day is in February? Well, the reason the sky is falling is because a lot of the very best receivers have signed today. There's hardly anybody left that you would like to consider at this point that, could be out there. I mean, look, that guy, who was the guy that we liked from Alabama that signed with West Virginia or was committed? Gerald Williams. Wasn't that his name?
Gerald Williams, yeah.
I mean, if you stayed on Gerald Williams the whole time.
I think he wanted to come.
Yeah, I do too. Could this happen? If you stayed on Xavier Bradshaw the whole time, could this happen? If you kept recruiting Wesley Grimes and said, we don't know how this is going to turn out, and tell you what, if you come up and you visit and we like you, we'll tell these other guys to pound sand. That's the way I think it should be handled. So to answer your question, the reason people are thinking the sky is falling is most of them have signed already. Now, I'm going to make a crazy prediction. It's probably not going to affect Notre Dame, but I don't think this signing day is going to matter in the end because I don't think it's over. We've seen kids get out of letters of intent left and right. We've seen that the NCAA, as soon as you lawyer up, they're not going to challenge you. They're going to let you do whatever the hell you want. So I don't think it's even over. I think more NIL money is going to come out before. This is just a prediction. Probably not going to happen at Notre Dame. I don't think it'll happen at Notre Dame. But at other schools, it wouldn't surprise me if before people start enrolling, if they don't enroll early, if they enroll in June, it wouldn't surprise me to see some guys flip because more NIL money comes out. So we'll see whether I'm right. But this is the way this whole thing is trending. How much? Go ahead.
How much NIL money must be being thrown at Travis Hunter right now?
Oh, I know.
To think about flipping from Florida State to Jackson State with Deion Sanders. It sounds like this is going down. That'll be insane.
It's insane.
Hamill said that he told Florida State that he's going to Jacksonville State, or Jackson State.
Unbelievable. Yeah. All right. Next question: Are there any 222 receivers out there that Notre Dame could get on it for February signing day? I don't know of any. And again, I'm sure Notre Dame's going to look at it, and there'll probably be a couple guys that maybe are late bloomers or whatever. But are they going to be as good as Gerald Williams? Are they going to be as good as Wesley Grimes or Xavier Bradshaw? Probably not. Maybe they will find somebody, but probably not. And I think that again is the problem. Here's a question for you. If Jojo Johnson recovers from his injury, is he a option at wide receiver? What do you think, Yama?
I mean, possibly. He'd be a slot type guy. That's what he was in high school. But at the same time, I think Jojo Johnson, before he got hurt, I think he was one of the freshman DBs who had kind of impressed them on the field the
Very
most.
much so.
So I don't think they want to move him just to move him if they think he can help there. And we know that they got some depth stuff at DB they got to deal with. So I guess it could happen, but I mean, I wouldn't say it's likely. I'd say it's more likely they would try to address it by getting more guys, signing and more guys here or the portal. That would be my guess.
All right. We got a bunch of Dell questions here. Since Dell got played, does he remain on the staff? And if he's gone, who replaces him? I mean, I'm not sure it really matters. I'm sure that Marcus Freeman probably had an understanding of what the situation was. And, is it on Dell? Is it on Brian Kelly? Is it on, I don't know who it is, but, I'm not sure that this particular incident would be the main reason that Dell would be fired, or if he is fired, it may be something that would be piled on top of other things potentially. I don't know, but I as far as other guys go, I think right now everybody wants to know names, but we're not going to hear names because everybody's in bowl mode right now. You can't go to your head coach and say, "Oh, by the way, Notre Dame wants to talk to me and interview me. Can I take off coaching your team for a couple days so I can go out and interview at Notre Dame? And and if they don't hire me, please take me back." That's just not realistic at this point. So there won't be a whole lot of new names pop up until the interview process starts, and I don't think that that's going to happen until after the bowl game. Anything you want to add, Yama?
No, I would, there might be some things that kind of leak out, but I think it'll all just kind of happen quickly after the bowl game.
Yep. All right. See if we have any more questions. Here's a question right here. How soon can signed players transfer? Well, and that's kind of what we just addressed.
They can do it right away.
Yeah. I think that, and that's what I've just kind of addressed. Yeah, I don't think it's going to impact Notre Dame, but I just have a feeling we're going to see some kid who signed at Florida, and then all of a sudden Alabama come with more NIL money down the road, and even before they enroll, and they'll flip again. I just really think that's what's going to happen, and it's not good for college football, but that's just the way it is. Next question: any chance Taylor gets moved to running backs to receivers coach, and ND hires another running backs coach? What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I guess that's a possibility. I don't know why. If there's a certain running backs coach out there that you want, I mean, I guess you could do that. But, Taylor seems to be coaching running backs and recruiting running backs just fine, and he continues to add to his, resume here with, when he first got here, everyone was saying, man, this guy used to coach Christian McCaffrey, blah, blah, blah. And now guys are saying, man, this guy coaches Kyron Williams, So he seems to be doing a good job. And, I think you're in the market for a receivers coach. So I think that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Wait, the one thing I will say though, he's originally a wide receivers coach. So it's not like crazy out of left field that he would. He played receiver in college, coached receivers for the Carolina Panthers. So it's not like crazy out of left field. Like it could happen. I bet, but like Christian said, he's obviously doing a really good job.
Yeah, and the players love him there. I mean, don't fix something that isn't broken, and that's clearly not broken. I mean, I think Taylor has done as good a job as a position coach as anybody on the team. When you look at the little things, fumbling, blitz pickup, just being in the right position at all times, and I just think that they're extremely well coached as a unit. Here's a question this guy had, and it's probably about my comments about coaches not. Or media and players and people, and I don't think it was. I think it was somebody directed in the chat, but he said, "Do you think media members should lie and just say everything and everyone is doing a good job, even when you don't believe it and it's not true?" Again, I think it was about the comments about Dell, and there were some media member was saying some really negative things about Dell, and look, it's not my. I don't do the hiring and firing, right? And none of us do the hiring and firing. Now, can we comment on it? Yeah, we can comment on it and say some things. And I think that's fair. Coaches realize that they're going to be criticized left and right. But what doesn't need to happen is, in my opinion, is I'm not the person who decides who should be hired and fired. I can comment on whether I think they're doing a good job. But at the end of the day, my opinion really doesn't matter. And it's also not helpful. It's just not helpful to the situation. And so everybody would say, okay, let's just say, for instance, that Dell gets fired, right? Was Dell going to get fired because a bunch of media guys stood up and said, Dell should be fired? Marcus Freeman ain't going to listen to what I have to say, or what you have to say, Chris, or Jamie, or anybody. He's going to he's there working with the guy every day. He doesn't need my opinion, or he doesn't need our opinion, or the fans' opinions. But what my point is, that affects what has happened, and Christian has given you real time, real quotes from players and their parents about how this has impacted it and how they're thinking about it. So you can say whatever you want, but these are the facts. These are coming from the actual players and their parents. And this was before Kelly was fired. So, I think that you have to look at the situation and say, okay, that's pretty obvious that it does have an impact. And so, maybe people should think about that. I don't know. All right, we're going to have a couple more questions, and then we got to get to the press conference here. It appears some schools have been weaponizing news, wiki edits, planning stories about coaches to affect recruiting. Is this something you have all seen? Would not surprise me in the slightest. I mean, this is just getting out of control. And, I mean, it's just like anything in the media. You can't, you don't even know what to believe anymore. But, if it works in politics, I don't know why it can't work in sports. And, let's be honest, sports fans are not the best at checking facts on things sometimes. So they're just not.
He might be referring to the Dell Alexander. There was something on Dell's Wikipedia saying he's at USC for 22. If that's the case, I can tell you it didn't have an effect with Marion Walker. I mean, these receivers, the other thing about Dell being Notre Dame kind of addressed it. They didn't answer the question on is Dell coming back or not, but they didn't say, oh, he's not coming. He's coming back. They kind of addressed it and said, yeah, we'll see what happens. It didn't seem to be a big sticking point. Now, I had some people say, hey, the biggest open secret in college football right now is Josh Gaddis is going to be gone. That wasn't from a coach, but it's someone from follows stuff closely. So, we'll see if that's the case. I'm not quite sure where he'd land. I know he was up for the Virginia job. But if anything, I think that kind of stuff where it's kind of even more underground secretive is something that could play into a recruit's mind to get him shaken.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, it's getting to be I would hate to be a college coach. I really would, man. Your whole livelihood, your whole family, everything is revolving around this anymore. And yeah, if it works out, it's great. It's a good job as far as money goes. But man, this is a tough business, and it's it's way tougher than it's ever been right now. And it's only going to get worse unless they kind of rein some of this in.
Well, and it's funny because the whole thing with the Wikipedia, and I think there was something too with Jeff Quinn. Someone wrote that Jeff Quinn was going to be the O-line coach at LSU, and that was written in his Wikipedia. But now, I mean, why wouldn't you just think that anything can happen? Because Brian Kelly literally just was asked a question directly of whether or not he was going to stay at Notre Dame, and he said no, immediately, and then less than a week later, he's gone to LSU, and Lincoln Riley's gone to U. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. It's crazy. It's it's always been crazy, and now it's much, much worse. And especially with the portal too, and incredible how many guys are just in the portal. And obviously the quarterbacks is almost expected, but just so many guys. I'm I don't know how all these guys are going to find a home. Where they're going to go, right? Yeah, a lot of them aren't, right? And
what they're going to find out is they just screwed themselves, and they're going to end up at MAC level schools and lower than that, I think. And this is a grass is always greener situation, and because of the NIL situation, it's gonna. You're going to get cut too. It's not just going in the transfer portal, right? They're just going to flat cut you. And anybody who thinks that's not happening, they're nuts. I guarantee you, players. Nick Saban's probably had 20 conversations with players at Alabama right now saying, you're never going to play here. You need to get out of here, or we're just taking your scholarship away. I mean, those conversations are happening everywhere, and at Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's the other thing that that's part of the portal thing too, is that a lot of these guys, they tell them don't come back, right? So with those guys, they might have a choice, and then they don't have. And especially for if you've been at a place 3 years and maybe you were hurt 1 year and you didn't play or whatever, I mean, it's got to be tough because now it's, you think that you're going to have this scholarship to finish your degree. Maybe some of these guys weren't taking it all that seriously and they might not even have a home. So I'm sure 5 years from now, people are going to be writing stories about a lot of these kids who just ended up going nowhere. Yep. or and didn't have anything. And maybe they went to D3 or something like that.
Yep. All right. Well, that's going to be it for today, guys, and or at least for this segment. We'll be back after the press conference sometime, and we'll be talking more Irish football and recruiting. Thanks for joining us, and if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, please sign up. I think you'll enjoy what we're doing. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon on YouTube Live, ISD TV.